My sister Ebony called me from 30,000 feet in the air and asked the strangest question of my life. Jasmine, is your husband home right now? I looked over the top of my laptop screen. Yes, I replied, confusion coloring my tone. He is sitting right there in the living room watching the game. Why, Ebony voice dropped to a terrified whisper. That is impossible, Jasmine. Because I am looking right at him. He just boarded my flight to Paris with another woman. They are in seat 1A and 1B holding hands. Before I could process her words, I heard the floorboards creak behind me. I turned around, and the man who looked exactly like my husband smiled. But it was not a smile I recognized. Before I tell you how I uncovered the most twisted identity theft in history, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever trusted the wrong person. The storm outside my Atlanta home was relentless, battering the windows with sheets of rain that matched the chaos about to erupt inside. I am Jasmine, a 32-year-old forensic auditor for one of the Big Four accounting firms. My job is to find the lies hidden in numbers, the secrets people try to bury under layers of corporate bureaucracy. I thought I was good at spotting deception, but as I sat at my dining table that Tuesday night, I had no idea I was living in the biggest lie of all. My husband Terrence was sitting on the beige sectional sofa in the living room. All I could see was the back of his head and the familiar slump of his shoulders as he watched ESPN. He was wearing his favorite cashmere sweater, the navy blue one I bought him for our 5th anniversary. Everything seemed normal until my phone buzzed with a FaceTime request from Ebony. Ebony is my older sister and the pride of our family. At 35, she is a senior captain for a major international airline, flying long-haul routes that most pilots dream of. We usually just texted, so a video call while she was in the cockpit during pre-flight checks was unusual. I answered expecting to hear about a delay or a change in her schedule. Instead, I saw her face pale and tight with anxiety against the backdrop of the illuminated instrument panel. Jasmine. Lock your bedroom door right now, she said, her voice urgent but controlled the way it always was when she communicated with air traffic control. What are you talking about, Ebony? I asked, glancing toward the living room. Terrence did not move. The volume on the TV was low but audible. I am serious, she hissed. I am at the gate at Hartsfield-Jackson preparing for the overnight to Paris. I just did my walkthrough of the cabin. Terrence is here, Jasmine. He is in the first-class cabin. I froze. That is ridiculous. Ebony Terrence is 10 feet away from me. He came home from the office an hour ago, said he had a headache and went straight to the couch. Look at him. I flipped the camera on my phone, pointing it toward the living room. On the small screen, Ebony could see the back of the man on the couch, the navy sweater, the way he leaned his head against his hand. Ebony shook her head on the screen, her eyes wide with fear. No. Jasmine. Listen to me. I walked right past him. I saw the scar on his neck. The one he got from that bike accident when he was 12. I saw the way he holds his whiskey glass with his pinky slightly out. It is him, and he is not alone. He is with a blonde woman, looked like old money dripping in diamonds. They were laughing about escaping to Paris. That man on your couch is not your husband. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I looked at the screen, then at the living room, then back at the screen. Ebony turned her camera discreetly toward the first-class cabin monitor. The feed was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. That was Terrence. My Terrence. Wearing a suit I had picked up from the dry cleaners last week, he was leaning in, whispering to a woman I had never seen before. Jasmine, get out of the house. Ebony commanded. Call the police. Do not engage him, whoever that is in your living room. He is dangerous. But forensic auditors do not run from discrepancies. We investigate them. I felt a cold calm settle over me. The same feeling I got when I found $1 million gap in a ledger. I hung up the phone without saying another word. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. But my hands were steady. I needed to know who was sitting in my house wearing my husband's clothes, drinking his liquor. I stood up from the dining table. The floorboards groaned under my feet, but the man on the couch did not turn around. The thunder outside rumbled, shaking the window panes, masking the sound of my approach. I walked slowly across the open concept living area. Every step felt heavy, like I was wading through water. I analyzed the figure on the couch. The haircut was identical, the posture was a perfect mimicry, but there was something off, a subtle tension in the shoulders, a stillness that felt predatory rather than relaxed. I stopped 3 feet behind the sofa. I needed to test him. I needed to be sure before I did anything drastic. I cleared my throat. "Babe," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly normal. "Did you take your blood pressure medicine?" The doctor said, "You need to take it with food." It was a trap. Terrence did not have high blood pressure. He was a fitness fanatic who ran marathons. He did not take any daily medication. The real Terrence would have turned around confused and corrected me. He would have asked if I was mixing him up with my father. The man on the couch paused. He slowly set his drink down on the coaster. He did not turn around immediately. "Yeah, I took it," he said. "Thanks for reminding me, babe." The voice was the final nail in the coffin of my reality. It sounded like Terrence. The pitch was the same. The timbre was identical. But the cadence was wrong. Terrence spoke with the polished diction of a man who had spent 10 years in corporate boardrooms, an educated rhythm that signaled expensive schools and high society networking. This man's voice had a grit to it, rough edge that he was trying to hide but failed to mask completely. It was the voice of the streets, not the boardroom. My blood ran cold. Ebony was right. The man in Paris was my husband. The man in front of me was a stranger wearing his skin. I took a step back, my hand reaching for the heavy crystal vase on the side table. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling with rage and terror. The man stood up then. He rose slowly, unfolding his frame with a languid grace that Terrence never possessed. He turned around. The face that looked back at me was my husband. His face, the same nose, the same jawline, even the same grooming of the beard. But the eyes were empty of any recognition or warmth. They were cold, calculating, and cruel, and the smile he gave me was terrifying. It was a smirk of someone who had been caught, but did not care, because he held all the cards. "Your pilot sister talks too much," he said, his accent slipping further, revealing a drawl that sounded nothing like Terrence. "She should focus on flying the plane instead of meddling in family business." He lunged at me with a speed that defied the laws of physics. 1 second he was standing by the coffee table, and the next his hand was closing around my wrist, trying to wrench the phone from my grip. The smell of him hit me, then a mix of stale cigarettes and cheap cologne that Terrence would never wear. "Give me the phone, Jasmine," he growled, his voice dropping the polished facade completely. My instinct should have been to freeze. That is what I did 5 years ago when a man with a knife cornered me in the company parking garage. I froze then, and I lost my wallet, my laptop, and my sense of safety. But I had spent every Tuesday night since then in a Krav Maga studio making sure I would never freeze again. As his fingers tightened, I did not pull away. Instead, I stepped into his space, using his own momentum against him. I rotated my wrist against the weakest point of his grip, just like Sensei Davis had taught me, and drove my elbow into his ribs. It was not a graceful move. It was ugly, and it was violent, and it worked. He grunted in surprise, his grip loosening just enough for me to stumble back. But he was strong, stronger than anyone I had ever fought in practice. He recovered instantly, shaking off the blow like it was nothing. "You want to play rough?" he sneered, wiping his mouth. "Fine, let us play." He charged again, tackling me around the waist. We crashed into the side table, sending the lamp and a heavy crystal vase crashing to the floor. The vase did not break on the thick rug. It rolled within reach as we grappled on the floor. He was on top of me, his weight crushing the air from my lungs. He pinned my shoulders down, his face inches from mine. His eyes were dead shark eyes, devoid of any humanity. I am going to make you wish you never answered that call. My hand scrabbled against the carpet searching. My fingers brushed the cold, smooth glass of the vase. It was a wedding gift from my aunt, heavy Irish crystal meant to hold roses, not save a life. I gripped the neck of the vase, my knuckles turning white. When he shifted his weight to reach for my throat, I saw my opening. I swung the vase with a primal scream, smashing it against the side of his head. The sound of glass shattering mixed with his howl of pain was deafening. Blood sprayed across my white blouse, warm and sticky. He rolled off me, clutching his temple, cursing in a voice that was pure street rage. I did not wait to see if he was unconscious. I scrambled to my feet, slipping on the scattered magazines. My lungs burned as I sprinted for the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood. "Get back here!" he roared behind me. I heard him stumbling, getting to his feet. I reached the master bedroom door just as his heavy footsteps thundered down the hall. I threw myself inside and slammed the heavy oak door. My fingers fumbled with the deadbolt, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Click. The lock engaged a split second before his body slammed against the other side. The wood groaned, but it held. I backed away, my chest heaving, listening to him pound on the door and scream obscenities that my husband did not even know existed. I was trapped, but for the moment, I was alive. The pounding stopped as abruptly as it began, leaving a silence that was heavier than the storm outside. I pressed my back against the wall, my eyes fixed on the brass handle of the bedroom door. I waited for the sound of a shoulder hitting wood, or the crack of a kick, but instead, I heard a low whistle. It was a tune I knew intimately. It was the silly off-key melody I used to hum to our old tabby cat Whiskers before she passed away 3 years ago. Only Terrence knew that song. He used to tease me about it, saying I was tone deaf. "You know I do not want to hurt you, Jasmine." The voice drifted through the door, calm and terrifyingly familiar. It had shed the street edge and slipped back into that uncanny imitation of my husband. "I just need you to be reasonable. I know you are scared, but think about the logistics. If I wanted to get in there, I could. I know the master key is taped under the third stair in the basement. I know the code to the wall safe is 0429. My breath hitched. He knew the safe combination. He knew where the spare key was hidden, a spot Terrence had chosen because he said burglars never check the basement stairs. This man had downloaded My Husband is Life. He was not just a look-alike, he was a clone built from shared secrets and pillow talk. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound brave. "Who are you?" "I am the guy giving you a choice," he replied, his shadow visible in the gap beneath the door. "You can stay in there and be a good girl for 24 hours. That is all I need. Just 24 hours of silence. Let him land in Paris. Let him check into the Ritz. Let him secure the future. After that I vanish. You never see me again. But if you keep fighting, if you try to call for help, I will burn this house down with you inside. And I know you disconnected the smoke detectors last week because they were chirping." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He was stalling. He was the alibi. As long as I was trapped in this room, terrified and silent, the real Terrence could parade around Paris with his mistress, building whatever new life he was financing with my stolen money. If I called the police now, this man would disappear and Terrence would claim I was having a mental break just like he did on the phone earlier. They had planned this. They had weaponized my own home against me. I did not answer him. I dropped to my stomach and crawled under the heavy king-sized bed, dragging my phone with me. The dust bunnies clung to my sweating palms. I turned the brightness down on my screen until it was barely aglow. I could not risk a voice call. He would hear me whispering. I opened the emergency text to 911 app. My fingers hovered over the keypad, shaking violently. "Intruder in home. 1242 Oakwood Drive. Male. Looks exactly like husband, but is an imposter. He attacked me. I am barricaded in master bedroom. He is threatening arson. Please hurry." I hit send and watched the little progress bar crawl across the screen. Outside the door, the whistling started again. It was jaunty happy. He was enjoying this. He was playing a game with my life while my husband played a game with my heart across the ocean. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the phone like a lifeline. I was not going to be a victim. I was going to be the witness who sent them both to prison. The message status changed to delivered. Now I just had to survive until the sirens came. The sirens grew louder, screaming a promise of safety that felt miles away. I heard the man outside my door chuckle, a low, dark sound that vibrated through the wood. Then came the heavy thud of boots running not toward the stairs, but toward the guest room at the end of the hall. The window there opened onto the garden trellis. He was not just running, he was escaping with the agility of a cat. I scrambled out from under the bed and unlocked the door, my hands fumbling with the latch. By the time I burst into the hallway, the house was silent except for the pounding on the front door. Police, open up. I ran down the stairs, throwing the front door open to a wall of rain and uniformed officers. He is in the back, I screamed, pointing up the stairs. He went out the window. 2 officers brushed past me, guns drawn, sweeping the house with practiced efficiency. I slumped against the wall, adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. I waited for the shout of an arrest, the sound of handcuffs clicking, or a struggle. Instead, there was only the static of radios and the sound of rain. After 10 agonizing minutes, a sergeant walked back into the foyer, holstering his weapon. The house is clear. There is no one here. And there is no sign of forced entry. The window in the guest room is shut and locked from the inside. I stared at him. That is impossible. He was right outside my door. He threatened to burn the house down. I led them to the living room, ready to show them the shattered crystal vase, the toppled books, the blood on the carpet from where I struck him. I froze. The room was pristine. The vase sat untouched on the side table. The books were aligned perfectly on the shelves. The rug was spotless. It was impossible. We had fought here. I had smashed that vase over his head. Then I saw it. A faint smell of industrial cleaner cutting through the lemon air freshener. He had not just escaped, he had staged the scene. He had erased the violence in the minutes before the police breached the door. Before I could stammer a defense, the landline on the kitchen counter rang. The sharp, shrill sound made everyone jump. I stared at the caller ID. Terrence Mobile. The sergeant picked it up, putting it on speaker. "This is Sergeant Miller. Who is this?" A video call request pinged. The sergeant accepted it, turning the screen so I could see. Terrence's face filled the frame, framed by palm trees and a sunny hotel balcony. The background looked slightly pixelated, a digital backdrop meant to simulate Miami. It was a green screen trick I had seen him use for Zoom meetings. "Officer, is my wife okay?" Terrence asked, his voice trembling with manufactured concern. "She called me in a panic saying someone broke in. I am in Miami for a conference and I am terrified for her." I stepped forward, my voice shaking. "You are not in Miami, Terrence. You are on a plane to Paris. Stop lying." The sergeant looked from me to the phone. Terrence sighed, a sound of deep, long-suffering patience. "Officer, I am so sorry. Jasmine has been struggling lately. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder last year, and sometimes when she forgets her meds, she has these episodes, hallucinations, paranoia. She thinks I am everywhere. Please do not arrest her. She is just sick." The sergeant's eyes shifted. The suspicion was gone, replaced by the pity one reserves for the unstable. He looked at the clean living room, then at my frantic face, and finally at the calm, concerned husband on the screen. I stood there, trapped in a reality my husband had rewritten, realizing that to them, I was not the victim, I was the problem. The patrol car taillights faded down the wet asphalt, taking my credibility with them. Sergeant Miller had left me with a card for a crisis hotline, and a look that said he pitied the poor hysterical woman. I locked the front door and leaned against it, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The house was quiet again, but the air felt heavy with the gaslighting I had just endured. Terrence had played them perfectly. He had used my fertility struggles and work stress to paint a picture of a fragile woman cracking under pressure. But I was not fragile. I was a forensic auditor. I found the truth in the numbers, and I knew that people always left a paper trail even when they cleaned up the crime scene. I pushed off the door and walked into the kitchen. The intruder had been thorough in the living room, erasing the struggle, but he had been arrogant. He assumed I was too scared or too crazy to look closer. I pulled the stainless steel trash can from under the sink and dumped the contents onto the tiled floor. Coffee grounds, vegetable peelings, and the remnants of my lunch spilled out, a chaotic mess that mirrored my life. I ignored the smell and began to sift through it using a pair of rubber gloves. It took 3 minutes to find the first anomaly. It was a small, crumpled wrapper, bright red and smelling artificially sweet. It was Big Red chewing gum, the cheap kind that burned your tongue with cinnamon. Terrence despised cinnamon. He called it a low-class flavor and refused to eat anything with it. He was a man of mint tea and artisanal dark chocolate. He would never chew gum that cost $1 a pack. I smoothed the wrapper out on the counter, staring at it like it was a smoking gun. This wrapper did not belong to my husband. It belonged to the man who wore his face, but not his tastes. I dug deeper. My fingers brushed against a small piece of stiff paper wet with coffee grounds. I pulled it out and wiped it clean. It was a bus transfer ticket from MARTA, the Atlanta Public Transit System. The timestamp was from 3 hours ago. The route originated in Bankhead, a rough neighborhood on the west side that Terrence avoided, like the plague. He drove a luxury sedan and complained if he had to park more than 10 feet from a valet stand. He had not taken a bus since college. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. The man in my house was not just an intruder, he was a plant, a doppelganger. Someone from the parts of Atlanta Terrence pretended did not exist. The physical resemblance was uncanny, but the habits were worlds apart. Terrence had sent a street-smart double to hold me hostage while he escaped to Paris. I stripped off the gloves and grabbed my phone, ignoring the trembling in my hands. I dialed Ebony number. She answered on the first ring, the background noise of the airplane cabin loud in her ear. "Jasmine, are you safe?" she asked, her voice tight. "I am alive," I said, my voice cold and hard. "And I am not crazy, Ebony. There is a AA look-alike. He was here. He left trash that." Terrence would never touch a cinnamon gum wrapper and a bus ticket from Bankhead. This was planned, Ebony. "He has a shadow." Ebony let out a breath she had been holding. "I believe you. I saw him. Jasmine, I saw the scar, but I also saw him use his right hand to sign a customs form. Terrence is left-handed. I knew something was wrong. Listen to me. Do not let him out of your sight when you land," I told her. "Keep eyes on him. I am going to find out who this double is, and then I am coming to Paris. He thinks he erased me, but he just gave me the evidence I needed to destroy him." I sat at my mahogany desk, the only piece of furniture in the office that felt solid anymore. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For 10 years, I had tracked embezzlers, money launderers, and corporate thieves. I could find a single missing dollar in a ledger of millions. But tonight, the crime scene was my own life. I took a deep breath and logged into our primary joint checking account. The screen refreshed, balance 0.00. I blinked, hoping it was a glitch. It was not. I clicked on the transaction history. A single wire transfer initiated yesterday at 9 in the morning. The recipient was a shell company I had never heard of. Azure Holdings Limited, based in Grand Cayman. $50,000 gone in a heartbeat. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a slow, heavy rhythm of dread. I opened a new tab and logged into our savings account, the one we had been building for the future nursery. Empty. Another wire transfer to the same Cayman account. I moved faster now, panic nipping at my heels. I checked my retirement fund. The login failed. Incorrect password. He had changed it. I used my recovery email to reset it, my fingers flying across the keys. When I finally got in, I felt the bile rise in my throat. A hardship withdrawal had been processed 3 days ago. The entire balance, nearly $400,000 accumulated over a decade of 60-hour work weeks, was pending transfer. But the final blow was the house. I logged into the mortgage portal. There it was. A home equity line of credit taken out 2 weeks ago for the maximum amount, $300,000. The funds had been dispersed yesterday. The signature on the digital document was mine. It looked perfect. Too perfect. It was a digital copy of my signature, likely lifted from a tax return I had signed last year. He had not just left me, he had liquidated me. He had spent months, perhaps years, planning this exit strategy. Every late night at the office, every business trip had been a cover for moving assets, setting up shell companies, and forging my consent. He had stripped the copper from the walls of our marriage before lighting the match. I stared at the glowing screen, the blue light reflecting in my tearless eyes. Most women would be hysterical right now. They would be wailing on the floor, paralyzed by the destitution staring them in the face. But I was not most women. I was a forensic auditor, and Terrence had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He left a paper trail. He thought moving money to the Caymans made it invisible. He was wrong. Money always leaves footprints, electronic routing numbers, IP addresses, timestamps. He had been arrogant. He had done everything from his laptop, the one he thought was secure, but he forgot that I set up the home network. I had admin access to the router logs. I opened the terminal on my computer and started typing. The rage that had threatened to consume me solidified into a cold, hard diamond of focus. He wanted a war. He wanted to leave me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. I pulled up the router history for the last 48 hours. There were 2 devices connected, his laptop and a burner phone. I traced the traffic. He had not just moved money. He had booked flights. He had reserved hotels. And he had purchased a one-way ticket for a second passenger. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silent house. You think you are smart, Terrence. You think you have won, but you just gave me the map to your destruction. I am not just going to find you. I am going to audit your entire existence until there is nothing left but a prison cell. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk, a sharp buzz that cut through the silence of the empty house. It was a priority alert from the American Express fraud department, usually reserved for transactions that triggered high-level security protocols. I picked up the phone, expecting to see a decline notification for one of the drained accounts. Instead, I saw a transaction approval for $25,000. I stared at the screen. The card listed was not our usual Platinum Delta SkyMiles. It was a Centurion card. The black card, the invitation-only titanium slab reserved for the ultra-wealthy. Terrence and I did not have a black card. We did not qualify, but as I dug into the account details, I saw how he had done it. He had leveraged my credit score, my professional status as a partner at a Big Four firm, and likely a mountain of forged income statements to secure the invitation behind my back. But the transaction amount was not what made my stomach turn. It was the location and the authorized user. The charge was at the Ritz, Paris, for a 5-night stay in the Coco Chanel suite. And the cardholder name printed right there on the digital receipt was not Terrence Brooks. It was Chloe Vanderbilt. I felt the air leave the room. Chloe Vanderbilt was not just a random woman. She was the heiress to the Vanderbilt pharmaceutical fortune, a woman whose face graced the society pages of every magazine in Atlanta. She was 24 years old, blonde, innocent, and worth billions. Terrence was not just cheating on me. He was investing. He was using my life savings as seed money to con a billionaire, his daughter. He was playing the role of the successful tech mogul, paying for 5-star suites and first-class flights, all funded by the wife he had left for dead in a locked bedroom. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was treating my money like venture capital for his next marriage. He was buying her affection with the hours I had worked, the holidays I had missed, the sacrifices I had made to build our life. He was literally spending my past to buy his future. Another alert popped up. A second transaction pending authorization. $50,000 at Van Cleef and Arpels in Place Vendôme. He was buying her jewelry. Engagement jewelry. He was moving fast. He needed to lock her down before the house of cards collapsed, before the bank foreclosed on the home he had leveraged, before I escaped the room. He thought would be my tomb. I hovered my finger over the freeze account button. My instinct was to shut it all down, to leave him humiliated at the checkout counter with a declined card, but the forensic auditor in me took over. If I froze the card now, he would know I was onto him. He would run. He would find a way to disappear into the Paris underground with the cash he had already siphoned. I needed him to feel safe. I needed him to keep swiping because every swipe was a breadcrumb. Every transaction was a GPS coordinate, leading me straight to him. I lowered my phone. The rage that had been a hot fire in my chest cooled into something solid and sharp like a blade. He wanted to live like a king on my dime. Fine. I would let him spend a little more. I would let him dig the hole so deep that when I finally kicked the ladder away, he would never climb out. I grabbed my passport and my laptop bag. The Ritz. Paris was about to have an unexpected guest. The morning sun hit my windshield, blinding me as I pulled into the driveway of my brother Andre's house in Buckhead. The pristine white columns and manicured lawn felt like a mockery of the chaos consuming my life. I slammed the car door shut, my laptop bag heavy on my shoulder. I needed to warn Andre. I needed to tell him that the brother-in-law he idolized was a thief and a con artist. Before Terrence drained him dry too, I pounded on the solid oak door, ignoring the throbbing in my cheek where the intruder had struck me. The bruise was already blooming, a dark purple visible even under the heavy concealer I had applied. Moments later, the door swung open. It was not Andre. It was Sarah, my sister-in-law. Sarah stood there in her Lululemon yoga gear holding a kale smoothie, looking every inch the wealthy suburban housewife she tried so hard to be. She was a white woman who had married into a successful black family, and somehow she had appointed herself the gatekeeper of our reputation. Her eyes raked over my disheveled appearance, landing on the bruise with a look of distaste rather than concern. "Jasmine," she said, blocking the doorway with her body. "You look terrible. Did you forget to take your medication again? Terrence told us you were having an episode." I tried to step past her, but she didn't move. "Andre." I called out into the house. "Andre, you need to come out here. Terrence is not who you think he is. He stole everything." Sarah let out a sharp laugh, stepping forward to force me back onto the porch. "Stop it, Jasmine. You are embarrassing yourself, and you are embarrassing this family. Andre is not coming out. He is on a conference call with his investors finalizing the crypto deal Terrence set up for us. We are about to make a fortune, and I will not let your hysterical jealousy ruin it." "Jealousy?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Sarah, my husband drained our accounts. He took a second mortgage on my house. He is in Paris with another woman right now." "Oh, please." Sarah rolled her eyes, taking a sip of her smoothie. "Terrence is in Miami working his tail off to build generational wealth for all of us. You should be thanking him instead of inventing crazy stories just because you feel inadequate. He is the definition of black excellence. Jasmine, he is lifting this entire family up, and you look at you, you are a mess. You are the angry, bitter wife, trying to tear down a successful black man just because you cannot keep him happy." The audacity took my breath away. Here was a woman who had never worked a day in her life, lecturing me about the man who had just assaulted me in my own home. She was parroting. Terrence lies perfectly. He had charmed her. He had promised her easy money, and she had eaten it up. "You do not understand," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "He opened a credit card and another woman is named Sarah. He spent $50,000 at a jewelry store this morning. Is that black excellence, or is that just theft? Sarah's face hardened. She stepped closer, dropping her voice to a venomous whisper. Go home, Jasmine. Take a nap, take a pill, do whatever you need to do to fix your head, but do not come back here spreading your poison. We are finally leveling up, and if you cannot handle that, then stay out of our way. She slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I stood there staring at the heavy wood, realizing that Terrence had not just stolen my money. He had stolen my family. He had turned them into accomplices, and they were too greedy to even see it. Turned around and walked back to my car. Fine. If they wanted to be blind, I would show them the receipt. I grabbed the bank statements from my bag. It was time to crash their little fantasy. I did not leave. I walked around the side of the house to the patio doors. They were unlocked, just as I expected. Andre never locked the back door because he liked the fresh air. I stepped into the kitchen. The smell of expensive coffee, and Sarah is pretentious. Organic candles filled the air. Andre was sitting at the breakfast bar, his head bent over a tablet. He looked up startled as I walked in. Jasmine, Sarah told you to leave, he said, his voice lacking any real authority. He looked tired. His eyes darted toward the hallway where Sarah was likely still congratulating herself on handling me. Andre, you need to listen to me, I said, walking up to him. Terrence is conning you. What investment did you make, Andre? What crypto deal? Andre sighed, rubbing his temples. Jasmine, please do not start. Terrence is doing us a favor. He got us into a pre-sale for a new token. It is exclusive, friends and family only. We are going to double our money in a month. I stared at my brother. He was a good man, but he was soft. He wanted the easy way out. He wanted the lifestyle. Sarah demanded without the grind. Show me the transaction, Andre. I said, my voice hard. Show me where you sent the money. Before he could answer, Sarah stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. I told you to leave, she shrieked. Get out of my house, Jasmine. You are toxic. You are just jealous because Terrence is helping us secure our future, and your marriage is failing. Secure your future. I laughed, a harsh sound that made Andre flinch. Sarah, Terrence is not investing your money. He is stealing it. How much did you give him, Andre? Tell me. Andre looked at Sarah, then at me. 50,000, he whispered. It was the college fund. For the twins. We cashed it out yesterday. $50,000. The twins' college fund money that our parents had started for them before they died. Money that was supposed to be sacred. I felt the blood drain from my face. Terrence had crossed a line I did not think existed. He was not just stealing from me. He was stealing from children. He told us to wire it to a secure holding account. Andre continued, his voice wavering slightly under my intense stare. He said it was for tax purposes. Azure Holdings Limited. Azure Holdings. I repeated the name, tasting the bile in my throat. That is the same shell company in the Cayman Islands where he sent my retirement fund. Andre, there is no crypto deal, there is no investment. That money is gone. You are lying, Sarah spat, grabbing Andre's arm. Do not listen to her, Andre. She is trying to sabotage us. She is trying to ruin everything because she is miserable. I looked at Sarah, her face twisted with greed and denial, then at Andre, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. They were not just victims, they were participants. Their greed had made them blind, and Terrence had played them like a fiddle. You want proof? I asked, opening my laptop bag. I will show you proof. I pulled out the stack of printed bank statements and slammed them onto the granite countertop. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. Look at the timestamp, I said, pointing to a line on the page. This is my retirement fund, transferred to Azure Holdings yesterday morning. And this here, this is your $50,000 transferred 3 hours later. And look where it went next. I flipped the page, revealing the credit card statement. The black card. The one with Chloe Vanderbilt's name on it. A $50,000 charge at Hermes in Paris. Processed this morning at 10 a.m. local time. I looked Sarah dead in the eye. Sarah, that $50,000 you gave him for your children is future. It did not buy crypto. It bought a Birkin bag for his mistress, and she is carrying it right now on the Champs-Élysées. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Sarah stared at the paper, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Andre put his head in his hands and let out a low moan. I did not feel triumphant, I felt sick. But I also felt focused. The time for politeness was over. It was time to burn it all down. The papers hit the granite with a slap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. Sarah flinched, her eyes darting from my face to the documents spread out before her. The top sheet was the transaction log for the American Express Centurion card, the one authorized to Chloe Vanderbilt. I pointed a shaking finger at the line item highlighted in yellow. "Look at it, Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Look at the timestamp, 10 a.m. Paris time. That was 4 a.m. here. While you were sleeping, while you were dreaming about your crypto millions." Terence was standing in a boutique on the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, buying a handbag that costs more than your car. Sarah picked up the paper, her perfectly manicured hands shaking. She squinted at the numbers, trying to make them make sense, trying to force them into the narrative she had built in her head, where Terence was the hero, and I was the villain. But numbers do not lie. Numbers are cold and hard, and they do not care about your feelings. $50,000. I continued relentlessly. Exactly the amount you wired yesterday. It did not go into a blockchain, Sarah. It went into leather and gold hardware. It went into a gift for a 24-year-old heiress who thinks my husband is a bachelor tech mogul. Do you want to see the receipt? Andre made a sound like a wounded animal. He snatched the paper from Sarah, his eyes scanning the lines frantically. He traced the routing number from his transfer to the Cayman account, and then the payment from that same account to the credit card. The trail was clear. It was undeniable. He dropped the paper and put his head in his hands, his shoulders heaving. "My kids," he choked out. "That was for the twins. We saved for 10 years. Jasmine. Every bonus, every tax refund. It is gone. It is gone." "Andre," I said, my voice flat, "and it is, and not coming back. Not unless we stop him." "But you were too busy calling me crazy to listen. You were too busy letting your wife insult me to look at the facts." Sarah's face had gone a sickly shade of gray. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow terror. She looked at the expensive coffee maker, the granite countertops, the trappings of the life she thought she had secured. "It was all built on sand." He said it was guaranteed," she whispered. "He said we would be rich." "He told you what you wanted to hear." "Sarah," I said, picking up my bag, "he played on your greed, and you let him. You let him steal from your own children, because you wanted a shortcut." I turned to leave. I did not feel pity. I did not feel satisfaction. I just felt a cold resolve. I had done what I came to do. I had exposed the lie. Now it was up to them to pick up the pieces. "Where are you going?" Andre asked, looking up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Jasmine, you have to help us. You have to get it back." "I am going to Paris," I said, not. "Looking back, I am going to find my husband, and I am going to get my money back. As for yours, you better hope there is something left when I am done with him." I walked out of the kitchen and out the front door, leaving the door open behind me. I heard Sarah start to sob, a high, thin sound of panic. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the wreckage of my brother's family in the rear-view mirror. I had my own war to fight. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with humidity as I pulled into the driveway of the house that was no longer a home. The forensic auditor in me had taken over completely, pushing aside the heartbreak to make room for cold calculation. I walked past the front door, where the police tape still fluttered in the wind, and headed straight for the detached garage. Terence called it his sanctuary. He had installed a biometric lock 3 years ago, claiming he needed a secure place for client files. I had never been inside. I always assumed it was full of golf clubs and cigars. Now I knew it was full of answers. I did not have his fingerprint, but I had a crowbar. I had bought at the hardware store on the way back. I jammed the curved metal into the seam of the side door and leaned my entire body weight against it. The wood groaned and splintered. I heaved again, channeling every ounce of rage I felt toward Sarah, toward Andre, toward the man in Paris. With a loud crack, the door frame gave way and the door swung open. The air inside was stale and smelled of motor oil and old paper. I flipped the light switch. It was not a man cave, it was an operations center. There were no golf clubs. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and a large workbench that looked more like a desk. I started tearing through the drawers. Nothing. Just tax returns from 5 years ago and manuals for appliances we did not own. I stood in the center of the room scanning the space. Terrence was meticulous. He would not leave something important in a drawer. I looked at the tool rack on the back wall. Was too organized. Every wrench hung perfectly straight. Every screwdriver was color-coded. I walked over to it and ran my hand along the pegboard. The bottom right corner was loose. I gripped the edge of the board and pulled. It popped off the wall, revealing a hollow space between the studs. Sitting there, nestled in pink insulation, was a gray metal lockbox. It was heavy fireproof and covered in dust. I pulled it out and set it on the workbench. It had a combination lock, but I was done playing games. I took a hammer from the rack and smashed the latch. I hit it again and again until the metal twisted and the lock shattered. I threw the lid back. Inside there was no money. There were no diamonds. There was just a thick manila envelope yellowed with age. The stamp on the front was faded but legible. Department of Family and Children's Services, Georgia. Dated November 12, 1990. My hands shook as I undid the string tie. I pulled out the documents. The first thing I saw was a photograph, a grainy, black and white Polaroid of two baby boys. They were identical. Same round faces, same wide eyes, same tuft of hair. I turned the photo over. Someone had written in blue ink, Terrence and Tyrell, 3 months old. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. I flipped through the rest of the papers. Adoption decrees, separation orders, Terrence Jamal Brooks adopted by the Brooks family of Buckhead. Tyrell Lamar. Brooks remanded to state custody foster care placement. Pending. The truth hit me harder than the intruder's fist. Terrence was not an only child. He was a twin. He had a brother who had been left behind in the system, while Terrence went to private schools and Ivy League universities. A brother who looked exactly like him but lived a life of struggle. This was the double. This was the man who had attacked me. This was the ghost Terrence used to haunt his own life. I held the birth certificate up to the single bulb hanging from the garage ceiling, my hands trembling so violently the paper rattled. The names were printed in stark black ink. Terrence Jamal Brooks and Tyrell Lamar Brooks. Born November 12, 1990 at Grady Memorial Hospital. Time of birth, 10:02 a.m. and 10:05 a.m. They were identical twins. I dug deeper into the metal box, pulling out a thick file labeled Tyrell. It was not a family album, it was a criminal dossier. Mugshots stared back at me, faces that were, my husband is yet strangers. The eyes in the photos were hard, hollowed out by years of survival. Grand theft auto at 18, check fraud at 22, aggravated assault at 25. He had spent more time in a cell than out of it. Then I found the letters. They were dated 2 years ago. Sent from Terrence to Tyrell at the state penitentiary. Dear brother, the first one began. I know we were separated. I know life dealt us different hands. Mom and Dad, Brooks did not want two. They only wanted the perfect one. But I found you. And I have a proposition. You need money. I need freedom, work for me and work. You will never sleep in a cage again. The bile rose in my throat. Terrence had not just reconnected with his lost brother. He had recruited him. The family who adopted Terrence, the wealthy Brooks clan of Buckhead, had separated the twins at birth, taking the healthy, quiet baby and leaving the crying, difficult one to the state system. They had erased Tyrell to curate their perfect family image. And Terrence Bad discovered this secret and weaponized it. I looked at a notebook tucked in the back. It was a training manual, handwriting that belonged to Terrence. Listed instructions for Tyrell: how to walk like me, how to sign my name, how to order my coffee. Do not slouch, do not use slang. Wear the navy sweater when Jasmine is home. She likes that one. My stomach churned. 2 years. For 2 years they had been swapping places. How many times had I come home to find my husband quiet and distant, attributing it to stress when it was actually a stranger sitting on my couch? How many corporate dinners had Tyrell attended while Terrence was with other women? The nights he worked late, the weekend conferences. It was all a lie, orchestrated by a sociopath using his discarded brother as a human shield. Tyrell was the muscle, the intimidation, the alibi. Terrence was the brain, the face, the bankroll. They were a two-headed monster feeding on my life. I slammed the box shut. The pieces of the puzzle fit together with a sickening click. The man who attacked me in the living room was Tyrell, desperate, hungry, and following orders. But the true villain was the man in Paris, the man who had turned his own brother into a tool to destroy his wife. I grabbed the birth certificate and the mugshots. I had everything I needed to prove the identity theft, to prove the fraud. But more importantly, I knew exactly who I was hunting. Now I was not just chasing a cheating husband, I was hunting the puppet master. And I knew exactly which string to cut to make him fall. I sat on the cold concrete of the garage floor surrounded by the evidence of my husband is duplicity. The birth certificates, the criminal records, the letters from prison. They lay scattered around me like the debris of a plane crash, but I was not a victim waiting for rescue. I was the investigator determining the cause of impact. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not used in 2 years. Jim Vance was a private investigator. My firm used for high-stakes corporate espionage cases. He was expensive, discreet, and ruthless. Jim. "It is, Jasmine," I said, when he answered, his voice gravelly with sleep. "It is midnight, Jasmine. You better have a body or a bank robbery." "Neither," I said, cutting him off. "I have a job. It is personal, and I need you on it immediately. I need you to find a man named Tyrell Brooks. He is a career criminal recently released. He is currently in Atlanta posing as my husband." I explained the situation with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. I told him about the assault, the cleanup, and the slip-up with the trash. I pulled the crumpled bus transfer from my pocket, smoothing it out on my knee. "I have a lead. Jim?" He used a MARTA transfer ticket from the Bankhead station, Route 51, stamped yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m. He is staying near there, probably a motel or a halfway house. He looks exactly like Terrence Brooks because he is his twin brother. Find him, Jim. Do not approach him. Do not spook him. Just find him and wait for my call. I am sending you his mugshot and the file now. Consider him found." Jim said, the sleep gone from his voice. "I will have eyes on Bankhead within the hour." I hung up and turned my attention to the next problem. Paris. My personal accounts were empty, drained by the man who had vowed to protect me. But Terrence had forgotten one thing. In his arrogance, he had only targeted the assets he knew about: the joint accounts, the home equity. He had forgotten that as a senior partner at a Big Four firm, I carried a corporate American Express Platinum card with a $50,000 limit strictly for business expenses. Technically, hunting down a fraudulent spouse was not a business expense, but retrieving stolen assets that were commingled with my firm is 401k contributions, could be argued as asset recovery. I did not care about the ethics anymore. I pulled the heavy metal card from the hidden compartment in my wallet and logged into the Delta app. There was one seat left in Delta One on the flight leaving in 3 hours. It cost $8,000. I did not hesitate. I booked it. The confirmation email pinged, and a grim smile touched my lips. I was not just going to Paris. I was going to war. I opened my text thread with Ebony. She was already in Paris, likely at the Crew Hotel trying to track Terrence from the ground. I typed a message, my fingers hitting the screen with force. I found the double PI. Is tracking him now. I just booked the red-eye to CDG. I land at 10 a.m. your time. Do not let Terrence out of your sight. Get some rest. Ebony, because when I land we are not going sightseeing, we are going hunting. Put on your war paint, sister. We are taking them down. I grabbed the file box and my laptop. I left the garage door open, exposed to the night air. I did not care about security anymore. The thief was already inside the family. I walked to my car, the corporate card burning a hole in my pocket, ready to chase a ghost across the ocean. The Jasmine who cried over fertility treatments was gone. The Jasmine who audited cartels was taking over. And she never lost a case. I stepped off the plane at Charles de Gaulle into the gray morning light of Paris. My body ached from the tension of the flight, but my mind was razor sharp. The last time I was here, Terrence and I were on our honeymoon eating croissants by the Seine and making promises that were as empty as my bank account is now. I walked through the terminal ignoring the romantic couples and the excited tourists. I was not here for romance. I was here for restitution. I saw her standing near the exit of the customs hall. Ebony. She looked like a general waiting for her troops. She was still in her full captain's uniform, the 4 gold stripes on her epaulets gleaming under the airport lights. Her hat was tucked under her arm, and her posture was steel, spine straight. People moved out of her way instinctively. In a sea of weary travelers, she was a beacon of unshakable authority. Seeing her standing there, strong and imposing, brought a lump to my throat that I swallowed down hard. I was done crying. She saw me, and her expression softened, but only slightly. She did not rush over for a tearful embrace. She waited for me to come to her. When I reached her, she pulled me into a hug that was brief and firm. "You made good time," she said, her voice low. Her eyes scanned my face, taking in the bruise on my cheek that I had tried to cover with makeup. Her jaw tightened, but she did not ask. She knew. We walked briskly toward the exit, our heels clicking in unison on the polished floor. The air outside was crisp, smelling of jet fuel and distant rain. A black town car was waiting at the curb, the driver already opening the door. Ebony did not mess around with taxis. Inside the quiet leather interior of the car, the reality of what we were about to do settled in. I looked at my sister. "I have nothing, Ebony." I confessed, the shame burning in my chest. He took the retirement fund, the savings. He even leveraged the house. I am fighting a war with an empty war chest. Ebony reached into the inside pocket of her blazer. She pulled out a sleek, matte black card. It was not a corporate expense card. It was her personal Centurion card. She pressed it into my hand. Her fingers were warm against my cold skin. "You are not empty-handed," she said fiercely. "You have me. And today, I am sponsoring this hostile takeover. Use it. Buy whatever you need to look like the woman who owns the room, not the woman who was robbed. We are not just going to catch him, Jasmine. We are going to dismantle him piece by piece." I looked at the heavy metal card, then back at my sister. "This is too much, Ebony. I cannot ask you to finance this." "You did not ask," she corrected me. I offered. "Mom and Dad always said we had to look out for each other. Terrence made a mistake when he stole from you. He forgot you have a big sister who flies 777s and has a perfect credit score. We are taking back everything. Jasmine principal and interest. Now let us go to the Ritz. I have a feeling your husband is overdue for a checkout. I gripped the card tight. The weight of it felt like a weapon. My sister was right. We were not victims. We were the reckoning. The Blacktown car glided through the streets of Paris, the city waking up around us in a blur of gray stone and wrought iron balconies. We pulled up to the Place Vendôme, the heart of luxury where the Ritz stood like a fortress of old money opulence. Ebony did not wait for the doorman. She strode into the lobby with the confidence of someone who spent half her life in five-star hotels. The concierge, a man with impeccable posture and a pin on his lapel, looked up and his professional mask broke into a genuine smile. "Captain Brooks," he said, switching effortlessly to English. "Welcome back to Paris. We were not expecting you until next month." "Change of plans," Henri Ebony said, leaning over the marble counter. "My sister is in town for a special occasion. We need a favor. Is a Mr. Terence Brooks staying with you? Perhaps under the Vanderbilt party?" Henri hesitated, his eyes flickering to the computer screen. Discretion was the currency of the Ritz, but loyalty was the currency of the aviation world. Ebony had flown. "Henri is daughter to Johns Hopkins for emergency surgery last year. Pro bono, he owed her. Mr. Brooks is in the Coco Chanel suite." Henri murmured low enough that only we could hear. "He checked in yesterday with a Ms. Chloe Vanderbilt. They have reserved the Bentley for a shopping excursion at 11. Ebony nodded, her face grim. "Thank you, Henri. We will be in the lobby bar. Do not announce us." We took a table near the heavy velvet curtains that shielded the bar from the lobby. It gave us a perfect view of the main elevators and the revolving doors. I ordered a double espresso. Black Ebony ordered sparkling water. We waited, watching the gilded cage of the hotel lobby churn with wealthy tourists and business tycoons. At 10:55, the elevator doors chimed. They opened to reveal a couple that looked like they had stepped out of a magazine ad. Terence was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, the cut emphasizing his broad shoulders. He looked taller, more commanding than the man who slumped on my couch in Atlanta. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his hand resting possessively on the small of the woman's back. Chloe Vanderbilt was radiant. She wore a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was swept up in a chignon, revealing diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement. She looked at Terence with adoration, her blue eyes wide and trusting. She had no idea she was walking next to a monster. I watched them, my coffee forgotten. Terence said something to her, and she giggled, leaning into him. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of tender affection that he used to reserve for me. My stomach twisted, but the pain was distant, duller now. It was replaced by a cold, analytical observation. I was watching a predator with his prey. "Their car is here," Ebony whispered, nodding toward the entrance where a gleaming silver Bentley pulled up to the curb. We watched as the doorman held the door. Terence helped Chloe in his manners, impeccable. His smile dazzling. He looked the part perfectly. The successful tech mogul, the loving partner, the man who had it all. As the Bentley pulled away, disappearing into the Paris traffic, I stood up. The grief was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was the mission. "Let us go," I said, turning to Ebony. "I need a dress, and it needs to be black, like a funeral. Because tonight we bury his lies." I followed Ebony out of the Ritz, not toward the metro, but toward a sleek black car, waiting just down the street. It wasn't the Bentley Terence had used, but it was understated and expensive, the kind of car that whispered power rather than shouted it. Ebony gave the driver an address in the Marais district, a place known for its hidden courtyards and exclusive boutiques. We stopped in front of a heavy wooden door with no sign. Ebony rang a small brass bell, and moments later the door swung open, revealing a woman with short silver hair and glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Ebony, darling," the woman exclaimed, pulling my sister into a hug. "You are early. And this must be Jasmine." This was Madame Dubois, a legendary stylist who dressed women who didn't want to be on the cover of magazines, but who owned the companies that published them. She looked me up and down, her eyes sharp and assessing. She didn't comment on the dark circles under my eyes or the tension in my shoulders. She simply nodded. "We have work to do," she said, leading us into a showroom filled with racks of silk, velvet, and lace. I walked past rows of beautiful gowns, but none of them felt right. They were soft, romantic, or elegant. I didn't want elegant. I wanted dangerous. I wanted to look like a weapon. Then I saw it, hanging alone on a mannequin near the back. It was a gown of deep crimson red, the color of fresh blood or old wine. The fabric was heavy silk, structured and architectural. It had a high neck but a back that plunged dangerously low, and a slit that ran up the thigh like a scar. "That one," I said, pointing. Madame Dubois smiled. "A bold choice. That is a prototype. It was designed for a woman who intends to leave a mark." I tried it on. The silk felt cool against my skin, molding to my body like armor. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the tired auditor who had been assaulted in her own home. She was a force of nature. The red dress made my skin glow, and my eyes burn with a cold fire. Ebony stood behind me, her expression unreadable. "You look terrifying," she said quietly. "Good." Madame Dubois added accessories: diamond drop earrings that caught the light like daggers, stilettos that added 4 inches to my height, making me tower, a clutch bag that looked like a piece of modern art. When I was finished, I didn't recognize myself. The bruise on my cheek was covered, but I didn't hide it completely. I let a shadow remain, a reminder of why I was here. "I am not going to that party to cry," I told my reflection, smoothing the red silk over my hips. "I am going to burn his world down, and I am going to look good doing it." Ebony handed me the black card. "Buy it," she said. "Buy it all. Consider it an investment in your future." I swiped the card, the receipt printing with a satisfying zip. I walked out of the showroom, the heels clicking on the cobblestones like the countdown of a clock. The transformation was complete. Jasmine, the victim, was gone. Jasmine, the executioner, had arrived, and she was ready for her close-up. The venue was a palace on the banks of the Seine, a sprawling estate that smelled of old money and fresh lilies. The Vanderbilt annual charity auction was the kind of event where the entry ticket cost more than my college tuition, and the champagne flowed like tap water. Rolls-Royces and Maybachs lined the cobblestone driveway, delivering captains of industry and European royalty into the golden glow of the entrance. When our black sedan pulled up, the doorman hesitated for a fraction of a second. He was used to old white men in tuxedos and women in pastel chiffon. He was not used to us. Ebony stepped out first, wearing a bespoke black tuxedo, cut sharp enough to draw blood. Her hair was slicked back, her posture commanding the respect of a 4-star general. She extended a hand to me. I stepped out onto the red carpet, and the air shifted. The crimson silk of my gown caught the flash of the paparazzi cameras pooling around my feet like liquid fire. I stood tall, letting the dress do the work. It was not just clothing, it was a declaration of war. The slit rode high on my thigh, revealing legs that had walked through hell to get here. The diamond earrings swayed against my neck, cold and heavy. We walked up the grand staircase, arm in arm. Two black women in a sea of European aristocracy. The chatter in the main hall dipped noticeably, heads turning as we passed. We did not shrink. We did not apologize for taking up space. We owned it. Ebony moved with the swagger of someone who controls 70 tons of metal in the sky, and I moved with the cold precision of an auditor who knows exactly where the bodies are buried. A waiter offered us champagne. I took a flute, holding it by the stem, my eyes scanning the room over the rim. I was not here for the art. I was not here for the charity. I was looking for a liar. The room was a kaleidoscope of jewels and designer fabric, but my focus was absolute. I filtered out the noise, the laughter, the clinking crystal. I was looking for the man who thought he could erase me. And then I saw him. He was standing near a sculpture by the far wall, holding court with a group of older men. Terence looked perfectly at home. He was laughing that deep, practiced laugh I used to love, throwing his head back in a display of charming humility. Chloe Vanderbilt stood beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She looked at him with the adoration of a woman who believes she has found a unicorn. A self-made black tech mogul, with no baggage and an endless bank account. He looked happy. He looked successful. He looked free. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. It was the smile of a predator who has just spotted the prey grazing in the open. He thought he was the king of the jungle, but he forgot that the lioness does the hunting. "Ready," Ebony whispered beside me, her eyes locked on the same target. "Ready," I replied, taking a sip of the champagne. It tasted like victory. "Let us go say hello to my husband." We cut through the crowd like a knife through silk. The sea of black tuxedos parted as Ebony and I moved toward the center of the room. I saw the exact moment Terence registered my presence. It was not fear at first. It was confusion. His brain simply could not compute the data. Jasmine was supposed to be in Atlanta, terrified and trapped in a bedroom. Jasmine was supposed to be wearing sweatpants and crying. Jasmine was not supposed to be in Paris wearing a gown the color of vengeance. Then came the realization. His hand spasmed. The baccarat crystal flute slipped through his manicured fingers and shattered against the marble floor. The sound cut through the ambient chatter like a gunshot. Champagne splashed onto his Italian leather shoes and the hem of Chloe's cream dress. Chloe gasped, reaching for a napkin, but Terence did not even look down. His eyes were locked on mine, wide and unblinking. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I saw him whisper something to her, a quick lie about cleaning up. He touched her arm reassuringly, but his hand was shaking. He stepped away from the group, moving with a frantic energy that cracked his cool facade. He was not heading to the restroom. He was heading to intercept me. I turned casually, walking toward a secluded corridor lined with tapestries away from the main ballroom. I knew he would follow. He had to. I barely made it around the corner before a hand clamped onto my upper arm bruisingly hard. He spun me around and slammed me against the damask wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I did not flinch. I did not cower. He was close enough that I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath, masking the scent of his panic. His face was twisted into a mask of ugly desperation, the charm completely gone. "You have lost your mind, Jasmine," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper close to my ear. "You think you can just show up here in that dress and ruin this. You have no idea what you are dealing with. You should have stayed in the room." He leaned in closer, his grip tightening on my arm until it hurt. But I did not pull away. I let him think he still had the power. "Tyrell is sitting outside our house right now." He threatened, his eyes darting back toward the ballroom to make sure we were unseen. "He has a gas can in the trunk, Jasmine." One text from me. Just one word, and he lights it up. "Your precious cat, Whiskers, and everything you own will be ash before you can finish a drink. If you make a scene out there, if you say one word to Chloe, I burn your life to the ground." He thought he held the ace. He thought threatening a dead cat and a foreclosed house would bring me to my knees. He didn't know the house was already seized by the bank. He didn't know Whiskers had died 2 years ago, and his memory was so self-absorbed he had forgotten. And he certainly didn't know his brother was already in handcuffs. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in 10 years I saw him clearly. He wasn't a monster. He was just a small, scared con artist who had run out of road, and I was the cliff. I looked down at his hand, gripping my arm, white-knuckled and trembling. It was the grip of a drowning man, not a conqueror. I did not pull away. Instead, I reached up with my free hand and gently adjusted his black silk bow tie. The gesture was intimate and terrifying. It froze him. "You really are pathetic, Terence," I said, my voice soft but cutting through the air like a razor. You are so busy playing a character that you forgot the script. Whiskers died 2 years ago. We buried her under the oak tree in the backyard. Or maybe Tyrell did that too while you were busy auditing your mistress. You do not even remember your own life. His eyes widened, the threat dying in his throat. But I was not done. I smoothed the lapel of his jacket, dusting off an imaginary speck of lint. And as for the house, go ahead and burn it. I flagged the fraudulent second mortgage with the bank yesterday. They froze the asset this morning. It is not my house anymore, Terrence. It belongs to the bank. If Tyrell lights a match, he is just destroying their collateral, not my life. He stepped back, his back hitting the wall. He looked like he was going to be sick. The realization that his leverage had evaporated was dawning on him. But I had one more card to play. The ace. But that is not the biggest problem you have right now, I whispered. Leaning in close enough to smell the fear sweating through his expensive cologne, I heard a rumor in the ballroom just now. Chloe is telling her friends she has a surprise announcement tonight, a little Brooks heir on the way. I watched the blood drain from his face, leaving him gray and ashen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Does she know Terrence? I asked, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial purr. Does she know about the vasectomy you had in 2019? The one you paid for with our joint health savings account, because you did not want to ruin your physique with children. I have the medical records in my bag. So unless you performed a biological miracle, you are being played by a 24-year-old. She is either lying to trap you, or she is pregnant with someone else. Is baby, and using you for the cover. The panic in his eyes shifted to horror. He looked toward the ballroom where Chloe was waiting, where he was about to propose to a woman who was potentially conning the con artist. The irony was perfect. He was trapped between a vengeful wife and a deceitful mistress, and the floor was opening up beneath his feet. I patted his cheek one last time. You better get back in there, baby. She is waiting. And so is the truth. I turned and walked away, leaving him slumped against the wall, gasping for air like a fish on dry land. The hunter had become the prey, and the trap was about to snap shut. I walked away from Terrence, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor, leaving him gasping for air against the damask wall. My phone vibrated against my thigh, a sharp, insistent buzz that signaled the next phase of the operation. It was Jim Vance calling from Atlanta. I slipped into a quiet alcove behind a velvet curtain and answered. Jim! His voice was loud, triumphant. We got him, Jasmine. It is over. I felt the tension in my shoulders snap like a rubber band. Tell me, I said. He walked right into it, Jim said. We tracked him to a 24-hour gas station on Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. He was filling up a 5-gallon jerry can and buying a lighter. He was not even trying to be subtle. My guys called it in, and Atlanta PD swarmed him before he could even screw the cap back on. He is in custody at the precinct right now. Did he talk? I asked, knowing the answer before he gave it. Men like Tyrell did not have loyalty. They had interests, and Terrence had stopped being interesting the moment the handcuffs clicked. He did not just talk. Jim laughed a rough, gravelly sound. He sang. He gave up everything, Jasmine. Apparently there is no love lost between the brothers. Tyrell told the detectives that Terrence promised him $50,000 for this job but only paid him $2,000. Up front, he called Terrence a cheap suit-wearing sellout who treats his own flesh and blood like hired help. He is furious, Jasmine, he said. He is done taking the fall, while his brother sips champagne in Paris. I closed my eyes, savoring the justice of it. Terrence's arrogance was his undoing. He thought he could exploit everyone, his wife, his mistress, even his own twin brother without consequence. He thought he was the puppet master, but he forgot that puppets have strings and strings can strangle you. He is cutting a deal, Jim continued. He is offering full cooperation in exchange for leniency on the arson charge. He is giving them everything, the identity theft scheme, the credit card fraud, the forged mortgage documents. He even told them about a burner phone Terrence uses to record his business ideas. Tyrell has it on him. He says there are voice memos on there that will put Terrence away for a long time. Secure that phone, Jim, I said, my voice steady. Get a copy of everything I need it for the grand finale. Consider it done, Jim said. Go get him, Jasmine. I hung up and looked back toward the ballroom. Through the gap in the curtains, I could see Terrence smoothing his jacket, composing his face, walking back toward Chloe with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. He thought he had dodged a bullet. He thought he could still salvage the night. He had no idea that 4,000 miles away, his shadow had just turned on him. I adjusted the strap of my clutch. I had the medical records. I had the bank statements. And now I had the confession. It was time to join the party. I slipped back into the ballroom, the ambient noise of clinking crystal and hushed conversations washing over me like a tide. My phone vibrated again. This time it was an email notification. The subject line was simply, payback. It was from Tyrell, sent via his lawyer from the precinct. Attached was an audio file extracted from the burner phone. I plugged my single Bluetooth earbud in and pressed play, turning my back to the room to hide my reaction. The voice was unmistakable. It was Terrence, but not the polished, charming man everyone in this room thought they knew. It was the voice of a man who despised everyone but himself. The recording was grainy, likely recorded in a car or a bathroom, but the words were crystal clear. I cannot stand her. Tyrell Terrence's voice sneered, dripping with contempt. She is like a puppy, always following me around, asking stupid questions about my business. She thinks I am some genius investor because I use big words. She is a stupid cash cow, Tyrell, a golden goose. Once I get that ring on her finger, I have access to the trust fund. The old man loves me. He thinks I am the son he never had. I give it 6 months tops. I will drain the accounts, set up the offshore trusts, and then file for divorce. She will be lucky if she has enough left to buy a Happy Meal. I felt a cold fury settle in my stomach. He wasn't just using Chloe, he loathed her. He was mocking her innocence, her trust, while spending her money. But the recording wasn't done. And do not get me started on Jasmine is family. He continued, his voice dropping lower. That brother of hers, Andre. He thinks he is a big shot because he bought a house in Buckhead. He is a joke, a clingy, pathetic loser who needs me to validate his existence. And his wife, Sarah. She is the worst. A social climber with no ladder. They are all parasites, Tyrell. Just like Jasmine, clinging to my coattails, dragging me down. I am cutting them all loose. Once this Paris deal is done, they are dead to me. I pulled the earbud out, my hand trembling. This was it. This was the nuclear option. He had insulted everyone. The billionaire heiress. My family. His own wife. He had laid out his entire plan in his own voice, arrogant and unfiltered. I looked across the room. Terrence was back at Chloe's side, whispering something in her ear that made her blush. He was playing the role of the devoted lover while secretly plotting to destroy her. It was sickening. And it was about to end. I forwarded the file to Ebony, who was standing near the AV booth, her eyes locked on mine. She gave a subtle nod. The trap was set. The evidence was loaded. All we needed now was the trigger. I put my phone away and smoothed the silk of my dress. I wasn't just here to expose a cheater. I was here to save a young woman from a predator and to show my family exactly who they had been worshipping. It was time to turn up the volume. The ladies' lounge was a sanctuary of silence away from the chaotic din of the ballroom. It smelled of expensive orchids and designer perfume. Walls lined with silk wallpaper and mirrors that cost more than my first apartment. I pushed the heavy door open and walked in, my red dress rustling softly against the marble floor, avoiding the attendant's gaze. There was only one other person in the room, standing at the vanity, touching up her lipstick with a shaky hand. It was Chloe Vanderbilt. She looked younger up close. Her skin was flawless, her eyes bright with the excitement of a woman who thinks she is living a fairy tale. She did not look like a villain, she looked like a mark. The Hermes bag was sitting on the marble counter next to her, a masterpiece of leather and craftsmanship screaming wealth. It was the bag meant to secure her loyalty, the bribe paid for with my stolen future. I walked to the sink next to her and turned on the tap, the warm water rushing over my hands, washing away the phantom sensation of Terrence's grip on my arm. I looked at her in the mirror. She caught my eye and smiled, a polite reflex of the well-bred. She had no idea who I was. She just saw a woman in a red dress washing her hands. "That is a beautiful bag," I said, my voice casual, warm, even. "It is a Birkin. 30, isn't it? Togo leather. Gold hardware," Chloe beamed, touching the bag lovingly. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was breathless sweet. "My boyfriend just gave it to me this morning. It was a surprise for the trip. He is wonderful." I turned off the tap and reached for a linen towel, drying my hands with slow, deliberate movements. I watched her in the reflection, watching the way her fingers stroked the leather, unaware of the blood money that bought it. "That is so sweet," I said, keeping my tone conversational, almost bored. "My husband is wonderful too. Or at least he tries to be. He actually bought that exact same bag this morning. Funny coincidence, right? He used the $50,000 he stole from our retirement fund to pay for it." I saw her hand freeze in midair. The smile faltered on her lips, her blue eyes widening in confusion. She looked at me, then at the bag, then back at me, searching for the punchline. But I did not smile. I just tossed the used towel into the wicker basket. "I hope you enjoy it though," I added softy, leaning in just a fraction. "It really is a stunning color for a getaway car, but you might want to check the receipt. If he put it on the Amex ending in 4009, that is actually my card, and I just reported it stolen." I turned on my heel and walked out the door, leaving her standing there in the silence. The lipstick had slipped from her fingers and rolled across the marble counter, clattering loudly in the quiet room. I did not look back. I knew the doubt was already blooming in her chest, like a poisonous flower, turning the beautiful gift into a heavy stone around her neck. The room began to dim slowly, the crystal chandeliers fading until the ballroom was bathed in a soft, expectant twilight. A single spotlight cut through the darkness, finding its target at the center of the stage. Terrence stood there basking in the attention like a lizard on a warm rock. He adjusted the microphone stand with a confident smile, the kind that had charmed investors and deceived wives for years. He looked every inch the hero of his own story, the successful businessman, the loving partner, the man who had it all figured out. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and rich, echoing through the silent hall. "Thank you for welcoming me into your beautiful city and your warm community. I am a man who deals in numbers, in facts, in concrete realities. But lately I have discovered that the most valuable asset in the world is not something you can count. It is something you feel." The crowd cooed softly, swaying to the rhythm of his lies. I stood in the shadows near a velvet rope, my red dress merging with the darkness, watching him weave his web. He was good. I had to give him that. He sounded sincere. He sounded humble. He sounded like the man I thought I married 10 years ago, before I knew his heart was a calculator and his soul was a void. I looked over at Chloe. She was standing near the front, her face pale in the ambient light. She was clutching the Hermes bag tight against her stomach like a shield. She looked trapped. The seed of doubt I had planted in the restroom was growing, spreading its roots through her mind. She wasn't looking at Terrence with adoration anymore. She was looking at him with questions. But Terrence was too blinded by his own reflection to notice. "I have been searching for a long time," Terrence continued, his eyes locking onto Chloe, ignoring the tension in her posture. "For a partner who understands the vision, for someone who challenges me to be better, and I think I have finally found her. Chloe, would you do me the honor of joining me up here? The room erupted in polite applause, urging her forward. Peer pressure was a powerful tool, and Terrence wielded it like a weapon. Chloe hesitated, glancing toward the exit, then back at the stage. She took a tentative step, then another, forced by the weight of 300 pairs of eyes. She walked up the stairs slowly, like a woman walking to the gallows. Terrence reached out and took her hand, pulling her into the circle of light. He reached into his pocket, and my heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what was in there. The ring bought with the last of my savings, the final shackle. He dropped to one knee. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath, waiting for the fairy tale moment. He looked up at her, his eyes shining with false tears. "Chloe Vanderbilt," he said, his voice cracking perfectly. "Will you make me the happiest man alive?" This was it. The point of no return. The moment he thought he had won. I turned my head slightly, looking toward the back of the room near the technical booth. Ebony was standing there, a dark silhouette against the glowing array of soundboards and monitors. She wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking at me. Her hand was hovering over the master console, her finger poised above the input button. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply raised my chin a fraction of an inch and locked eyes with my sister. It was a small movement, invisible to everyone else in the room. But to us, it was the signal. It was the command to fire. "Do it," I whispered into the silence. Ebony's hand dropped. The time for speeches was over. It was time for the truth to speak. The diamond was inches from Chloe, his fingers sparkling under the spotlight like a promise of forever. The silence in the ballroom was thick with anticipation, breathless and heavy. Terrence opened his mouth to deliver the final line of his performance. The words that would seal his access to the Vanderbilt fortune. But before a sound could leave his throat, a high-pitched screech of audio feedback tore through the room, shattering the romantic atmosphere. The guests flinched, covering their ears. The soft ambient music cut out, instantly replaced by a harsh, static hiss. The massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a tasteful loop of falling rose petals, flickered violently, the image distorted, pixelating into a chaotic mess of gray and white noise. Terrence stood up, his face twisting in confusion, waving frantically at the tech booth. "Turn it off," he mouthed, his composure cracking simply, thinking it was a glitch. Then the static cleared, the rose petals were gone, replaced by the stark, unflinching glare of fluorescent lights in a windowless room. The camera angle was low, wide, and gritty, showing a metal table bolted to the floor. Seated behind it was a man wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled to the table's surface. A collective gasp swept through the room like a cold wind. The man on the screen looked exactly like the man on the stage. It was like looking into a twisted mirror. The man in the video had the same jawline, the same eyes, but his face was hard, hollowed out by a life lived. Without privilege, he leaned into the camera, his expression one of pure, unadulterated hate. "My name is Tyrell Brooks," the man on the screen said, his voice booming through the ballroom speakers, raspy and raw. "And the man standing in front of you holding that ring is my twin brother, Terrence." Terrence dropped the ring. It hit the stage with a tiny, insignificant ping that was lost in the growing murmur of the crowd. He spun around, staring up at the giant image of his own face staring back at him. "No," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off! It is a deepfake! It is a lie!" But Tyrell continued, his voice relentless, drowning out. "Terrence's protests. I am currently sitting in an interrogation room at the Atlanta Police Department," Tyrell said, looking straight into the lens. "For the past 2 years, I have been hired by my brother to be his stand-in, to be his shadow. He pays me to live in his house, to pretend to be him, so he can travel the world and hunt for victims. And that is exactly what you are, Chloe. Vanderbilt. You are a victim. Chloe stepped back, her hands flying to her mouth. The Hermes bag slipped from her shoulder, sliding down her arm. Forgotten. She looked from the man on the screen to the man in front of her eyes darting between the identical faces. The horror on her face was absolute. He calls you a cash cow. Chloe Tyrell spat the words out with venom. He told me the plan was to marry you, drain your trust fund into offshore accounts, and then leave you with nothing, just like he did to his wife, Jasmine. He is not a tech mogul. He is a thief. He is using stolen money to buy that ring. And right now, while he is playing Prince Charming, I was supposed to be burning his house down to destroy the evidence. Terrence lunged toward the side of the stage, his face purple with rage, trying to find a way to cut the power, but the video kept playing. The audio was everywhere, surrounding him, burying him. He hates you, Tyrell said, his voice dropping to a growl. He laughs at you behind your back. Joke is on him. The only person getting burned today is him. The screen went black, leaving the image of the orange jumpsuit burned into everyone's retinas. The silence that followed was not romantic. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls. All eyes turned to Terrence, who stood alone on the stage, stripped of his mask, naked in his deceit. The darkness of the screen offered no sanctuary, because the speakers were still alive, crackling with a menacing static that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Terrence was still frozen on stage. His hand half reached out toward the tech booth as if he could strangle the sound waves themselves. He thought the video was the worst of it. He thought seeing his twin brother in an orange jumpsuit was the climax. But he was wrong. The video was just the visual aid. Now came the confession. The audio quality shifted. It was clearer now, closer, recorded not in a prison interrogation room, but in the intimacy of a car. The sound of a turn signal clicked rhythmically in the background, a metronome to his destruction. Then Terrence's voice filled the vaulted ceiling of the ballroom, loud and arrogant and undeniably him. She is so desperate. It is actually sad. His voice boomed, dripping with a casual cruelty that made people flinch. I swear, Tyrell, I could tell her the sky is green, and she would buy me a pair of tinted glasses just to see it my way. Marrying that fool is just the entry fee. The real prize is the foundation. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. The wealthy patrons who had just been opening their checkbooks for this man froze. The Vanderbilt Charity Foundation was sacred ground in this room. It was the legacy of Chloe's grandmother, and Terrence was talking about it like it was a piggy bank. Once the ink is dry on the certificate, I get a seat on the board. The voice continued, oblivious to the hundreds of witnesses listening to it. Now I will have signature authority. Tyrell, I give it 6 months, I will bleed that. Charity dry funnel the assets into the Cayman Holdings, and then ghost her. I will be sipping Mai Tais on a private island, while she is still trying to figure out how to file the annulment. She believes every word I say. It is like taking candy from a baby. The recording cut off with a sharp click, leaving an echo that seemed to bounce off the gilded walls. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was not the polite silence of an audience. It was the horrified silence of a witness to a murder. Terrence stood center stage, but he had shrunk. The confident posture was gone. The charm was evaporated. He looked small and naked and terrified. He slowly turned his head toward the crowd, searching for a friendly face, searching for an escape route. But there were no friends left. The men who had been laughing with him 10 minutes ago were now looking at him with undisguised disgust. The women who had admired his devotion were clutching their pearls and whispering. Furiously, Terrence opened his mouth to speak, to deny it, to spin another web of lies, but no sound came out. He was drowning in his own words. The spotlight which he had craved so desperately all night was now his prison, keeping him pinned in place for the world to see. He looked at Chloe, but she was not looking at him. She was staring at the floor, her face a mask of shock, the realization crashing over her that the man she loved was not just a cheater, but a predator who had hunted her for sport. The game was over, and everyone knew the score. The echo of the recording faded, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. The entire ballroom held its breath, waiting for the heiress to crumble, waiting for the tears and the scene of a broken heart. But Chloe Vanderbilt did not crumble. She stood frozen for a heartbeat, her eyes fixed on the man who was currently groveling on his knees, trying to grab the hem of her dress. "Chloe, baby, please." Terrence stammered, his voice a high-pitched whine of desperation. "Deeply pathetic to witness. That is not real. It is AI. It is a deep fake set up by my jealous ex-wife. She is crazy, Chloe. You know she is crazy." "Do not believe it." Chloe looked down at him. The shock in her eyes vanished, replaced by a clarity that was terrifying to behold. She did not pull away. She stepped into his space. She dropped the Hermes bag, letting it hit the floor with a heavy thud, as if shedding the weight of his lies. Then she wound up her arm and swung. The slap connected with a sound that cracked like a whip echoing off the high ceilings. It was not a slap of passion, it was a slap of correction. It carried the weight of every lie, every stolen dollar, and every insult he had hurled at her behind her back. The force of the blow was so violent that it knocked Terrence off balance. His expensive Italian loafers slipped on the polished stage floor, and he crashed onto his side, landing in a heap of humiliation at her feet. The crowd gasped, but Chloe did not flinch. She stood over him, looking down like a queen surveying a peasant who had tried to steal the crown. She smoothed her hair, her hand steady. "You think I am stupid, Terrence," she said, her voice ringing out clear and cold without a single tremor. "You think because I have a trust fund. I am blind. You called me a cash cow. You called me a fool. But the only fool here is you." Terrence tried to sit up, clutching his swelling cheek, but she took a step forward, forcing him to cower back down. "I knew you were spending money. We did not have," she continued mercilessly. "I saw the charges. I saw the jewelry receipts that did not match what you gave me. I had my suspicions weeks ago. But I needed to be sure. So I tested you." She leaned down, her voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone picked up perfectly. "There is no baby. Terrence. I am not pregnant. I never was. I told you that lie this morning just to watch your face. I wanted to see if you would look happy, or if you would look like a man whose exit strategy just got complicated and you failed. You looked terrified." Terrence stared up at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. The trap he thought he had set had been his own execution. "And you can stop blaming your ex-wife," Chloe said, straightening up and looking out into the darkness of the room, searching the shadows until her eyes found mine, standing by the tech booth. She nodded, a gesture of respect from one woman to another. "Thank you, Jasmine," she said loud enough for the back row to hear. "Thank you for sending me the bank records and the medical history 10 minutes ago. You were right about everything. He is not a mogul, he is a parasite, and he is fired." She turned back to the security guards who were waiting in the wings. "Get this trash off my stage," she commanded, "and call the police. I believe he has a date with his brother in Atlanta." The slap was the signal, but the arrival of Richard Vanderbilt was the execution. The crowd parted instantly as Chloe's father marched toward the stage. He was a man who moved mountains with a phone call, and right now he looked ready to bury Terrence under one. He did not yell. He did not make a scene. He simply stood at the base of the stairs and nodded to the head of security, who was speaking rapidly into an earpiece. Then the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, and the room flooded with the flashing blue lights of emergency strobes cutting through the warm candlelight. It was not hotel security. It was the Police Nationale, and flanked by them were agents in plain clothes wearing badges that I recognized immediately. Interpol Terrence scrambled backward on the stage, crabbing away from the approaching officers. his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. He tried to stand up to run toward the wings, but two uniformed officers were already there, blocking the exit with their hands on their holsters. There was nowhere to go. The box he had built for himself had finally locked shut. "Monsieur Brooks," the lead detective shouted, his voice booming over the commotion. "You are under arrest for international wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. We have a warrant for your extradition to the United States," Terrence screamed, claiming it was a mistake, claiming he was a victim, but the officers did not care. They swarmed the stage with efficient brutality. They grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back with force. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. It was the sound of my freedom. It was the sound of justice, finally catching up to the man who thought he could outrun his own shadow. I watched as they hauled him up. He looked small between the burly officers. His tuxedo was rumpled, his hair disheveled, his face a mask of pure terror. He looked out at the crowd, pleading with his eyes for someone, anyone to help him. But the room was a sea of stone faces. The wealthy elite of Paris did not tolerate failure, and they certainly did not tolerate being conned. They looked at him with disdain, sipping their champagne as if he were nothing more than a bad act being hook off the stage. As they dragged him down the stairs, he passed Chloe. She stood next to her father, her face dry and hard. She did not look away. She watched him being manhandled, her chin held high, reclaiming the dignity he had tried to steal from her. And then they marched him past me. I stepped out from the shadows, my red dress blazing like a warning beacon in the gloom. He saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a second the screaming stopped. He saw the woman he had underestimated. He saw the auditor who had balanced the books. "Jasmine," he croaked, his voice broken. "Please," I did not say a word. I simply raised my champagne flute in a silent toast and took a sip. The bubbles tasted like victory. They dragged him out the heavy doors, slamming shut behind him, sealing his fate. The room erupted into whispers, but I did not hear them. All I could hear was the beating of my own heart, strong and steady and free. The nightmare was over. The audit was complete and the balance was zero. The glow of the iPad screen cast a ghostly blue light over the living room in Buckhead, illuminating the wreckage of a family that had built its foundation on sand. Andre sat on the edge of the beige sofa, his hands clasped so tightly between his knees that his knuckles were white beside him. Sarah was pacing the floor, her eyes glued to the live stream that Ebony was broadcasting from her phone in Paris. The connection was crystal clear, showing every pixel of the disaster unfolding across the ocean. We watched in stunned silence as the French police dragged Terrence off the stage. His tuxedo ruined his face, a mask of terror. We heard the accusations. We heard the confession played over the speakers, and then we saw the handcuffs. For a moment, there was no sound in the house except the distant hum of the refrigerator. Then Sarah let out a scream that sounded less like grief and more like a banshee wailing over lost gold. Dropped to her knees on the expensive Persian rug, clawing at her hair with manicured nails. "My money!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "My $50,000, Andre. He is being arrested. That means the accounts are frozen. That means the money is gone." She did not cry for her brother-in-law. She did not cry for the betrayal of trust, or for the fact that Jasmine had been terrorized in her own home. She cried for her investment. She cried for the status she thought she had bought. She scrambled toward the iPad, her fingers stabbing at the glass as if she could reach through the screen and shake the money out of Terrence. "His pockets! He promised me," she sobbed, ugly mascara, stained tears running down her face. "He promised we would be rich," he said. The crypto deal was a sure thing. Jasmine did this. She ruined everything. If she had just kept her mouth shut, we could have gotten our payout before they caught him. She is so selfish. She always has to be the center of attention. Something inside, Andre snapped. It was the audible sound like a dry twig breaking in a dead forest. He stood up slowly, towering over his weeping wife. For 10 years, he had been the peacemaker, the quiet one, the husband who nodded and smiled while Sarah spent his paycheck and insulted his family. But tonight, the silence ended. "Shut up, Sarah!" Andre roared, his voice shaking the walls. Sarah froze mid-sob, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She had never heard him raise his voice in her life, not once. But the man looking down at her now was not the man she had married. This was a man who had just watched his future evaporate because of her greed. "Do not you dare blame Jasmine," Andre said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "Jasmine is the victim here. Jasmine is the one who was attacked. Jasmine is the one who figured it out while you were busy measuring drapes for a house we cannot afford." "You want to know where the money went, Sarah? It did not go to crypto. It went to a handbag for a mistress. It went to a hotel suite in Paris. And you gave it to him." "I was trying to help us," Sarah stammered, shrinking back against the sofa. "I wanted us to have more. Andre, I wanted us to be like them, to be successful." "No," Andre cut her off. Stepping closer, "You wanted to be famous. You wanted the image. You wanted to post about Black excellence on Instagram while looking down your nose at my sister. You called her crazy. Sarah, you stood in this room yesterday and told her she was off her meds while she was trying to save us. You let a con man steal our kids' college fund because he flattered you." He reached down and picked up the iPad, turning off the stream. The image of the empty stage faded to black, leaving them in the dim room. "The money is gone," Andre said, his voice flat and cold. "And honestly, I do not care about the money. I can work. I can save, but I cannot get back the respect I lost for you. You chose a thief over family, Sarah. You chose greed over loyalty. And now we have nothing. I hope the likes on Facebook were worth it because that is all you have left." He turned his back on her and walked out of the room, ignoring her wails as she curled into a ball on the floor. He walked straight to the twins' bedroom and opened the door, watching them sleep innocent and unaware that their parents' American dream had just turned into a nightmare. The handcuffs clicked shut on Terrence's wrists in Paris at midnight, but in Atlanta it was still business hours, and my lawyer was ready to strike. Alan had been sitting in his office with a drafted emergency injunction waiting for my signal. The moment I texted him the photo of Terrence being led away by Interpol, he filed the motion. The legal system usually moves at a glacial pace, but when you have a signed confession from a co-conspirator and an active extradition order for international wire fraud, judges tend to move a lot faster. By the time Terrence was being booked into a French holding cell, his assets in America were frozen solid. We didn't just lock the accounts, we seized control of the narrative. The key to everything was Tyrell. Sitting in that interrogation room in Atlanta, he had provided the smoking gun. He admitted on record that he was the one who walked into the bank, branches wearing Terrence's suits. He admitted that he was the one who forged my signature on the home equity line of credit documents. He described exactly how they practiced my signature for hours until he could replicate it perfectly. That confession was the golden ticket. It proved that the debts were not marital liabilities. They were the result of criminal identity theft. The bank could not hold me responsible for a loan taken out by a stranger pretending to be my husband. I walked into the main branch of First National 3 days after I returned from Paris. Mr. Henderson, the branch manager who had previously dismissed my concerns with a condescending smile, looked like he was about to have a heart attack. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I simply placed a heavy binder on his mahogany desk. Inside was the police report, the affidavit from Tyrell, and a letter from the district attorney. I told him he had 2 choices. He could admit that his bank failed its security protocols and allowed a fraudster to drain my life savings. Or he could explain to the press why First National was facilitating international money laundering. He chose the first option. The reversal was immediate and satisfying. I watched the computer monitor as the transactions were voided one by one. The $50,000 wire transfer to the Cayman Islands bounced back. The unauthorized withdrawal for the engagement ring returned. The retirement fund was restored to its original balance with interest. The bank absorbed the losses, terrified of the lawsuit I was ready to file. But the most important victory was the house. The fraudulent second mortgage that Tyrell had signed for was declared null and void. The lien was lifted. The threat of foreclosure evaporated into thin air. Drove home that afternoon and stood in the driveway looking at the house I had fought so hard to keep. It was still standing. The windows were dark, but the red seizure notice was gone. I walked to the front door and keyed in my code. The lock chirped a happy, welcoming sound. I stepped inside and took a deep breath. The house smelled of lemon polish and silence. It was no longer a prison or a crime scene. It was my sanctuary again, and this time I held the only key. The visiting room at Fleury-Mérogis prison was a world away from the gilded ballrooms of Paris. It was cold, sterile, and smelled faintly of bleach and unwashed bodies. I sat on a bolted metal stool, my hands folded calmly on the scratched ledge of the plexiglass divider. It had been 7 days since the gala, 7 days since the applause turned into handcuffs, 7 days since I became a free woman. When the heavy steel door buzzed open and the guard let him in, I almost did not recognize the man who walked toward me. The bespoke tuxedo was gone, replaced by a shapeless gray prison uniform that hung loosely on his frame. His beard, usually trimmed to the millimeter, was scruffy and unkempt, growing in patchy and wild. But it was his eyes that had changed the most. The arrogance was gone, extinguished like a candle leaving behind a desperate, terrified hollow. He sat down heavily and picked up the black phone receiver, his hand trembling so hard the cord shook. "Jasmine," he choked out his voice, tinny and distorted through the speaker. "Thank God you came. I knew you would come. You are the only one who cares about me. You have to get me out of here." "The conditions. Jasmine, you cannot imagine. They treat me like an animal. You have to call the embassy. You have to post bail. I know you got the money back. I know the bank restored the funds. You can afford it." I did not say a word. I just watched him squirm, analyzing him like a bug pinned under glass. Seeing that his demands were not working, he switched tactics instantly. The anger evaporated, replaced by a weeping, pitiful vulnerability that I had seen him use 1,000 times to get his way. Tears began to stream down his face, tracking through the grime on his cheeks. "Baby, please listen," he sobbed, pressing his forehead against the cold glass. "I know I messed up. I know it looks bad. But you have to understand where I came from. The system broke us, Jasmine, me and Tyrell. We were just kids, separated and tossed aside. I was so scared of being poor again. I was scared of ending up like him, eating out of trash cans. Everything I did it because I was terrified. I wanted to be the man you deserved. I wanted to give you the world, and I panicked." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, searching for a crack in my armor, seeking the soft-hearted woman he had married. "We are husband and wife. Jasmine," he whispered, "in sickness and in health. Remember you vowed before God. You cannot leave me here to rot. I am your family, not Andre, not Ebony. Me. We can fix this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them Tyrell is lying, and I will make it up to you. I swear I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." It was a masterclass in manipulation. 10 years ago, it would have worked. I would have felt sorry for the little boy lost in the system. I would have opened my checkbook to save him. But looking at him now, all I saw was a stranger who had weaponized my empathy and tried to destroy me. The man I loved never existed. He was just a character played by a con artist, and the show was finally over. I looked at the man who had shared my bed, who had whispered love songs in my ear while stealing my retirement, and realized with a sudden clarity that I did not hate him anymore. I felt absolutely nothing. I sat there watching the hope drain out of his face like water from a cracked cup. He was waiting for me to crumble. He was waiting for the soft-hearted woman who used to make him soup when he had a cold. But that woman was gone, burned away by the fires he had lit. I reached into my leather tote bag and saw him lean forward, his eyes lighting up with a pathetic desperation. He thought I was reaching for a checkbook or a lawyer's business card. He thought I was reaching for a lifeline. Instead, I pulled out a thick document, staples crisp and sharp. I did not slide it through the slot. I simply held it up against the scratched plexiglass so he could read the bold black letters at the top. Petition for dissolution of marriage. It was already signed. My signature was firm and unshakable in blue ink. The line for his signature was blank waiting for him, but it did not matter if he signed it or not. The judge would grant it by default, now that he was a felon. I picked up the receiver one last time, and my voice was as cold as the concrete floor beneath my feet. "Save the tears, Terrence," I said, cutting off his sputtering protests. I audited the orphanage records. Remember, I saw the case files. You were not the one eating out of trash cans. That was Tyrell. You were the one adopted by the Brooks, family of Buckhead. You went to private school. You had piano lessons and summer camps. You had every advantage in the world, and you threw it away because you were too lazy to work for it. You are not poor because of your circumstances. Terrence, you are poor because of your character. You are spiritually bankrupt. He flinched, as if I had slapped him. His mouth opened and closed, but no lies came out. And do not count on family loyalty to save you. I continued, leaning in closer so he could see the absolute lack of pity in my eyes. I spoke to the district attorney in Atlanta this morning. They are cutting Tyrell a deal. He is not going to prison for the arson. He is getting 3 years of probation and a fresh start. In exchange, he is testifying against you. He is giving them everything. The voice memos, the forged documents, the history of every scam you pulled since college. He is going to be the nail in your coffin. Terrence turned a sickly shade of gray, gripping the counter for support. The charges are federal, Terrence wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering across international borders. The prosecutor is not looking for a plea bargain. He is looking to make an example out of you. They are asking for 20 years. You will be 55 years old when you walk out of a cell. You will have nothing. No money, no youth, no looks, and no wife. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I did not feel sad. I did not feel angry. I felt light, weightless, unburdened for the first time in years. "Good luck with the appeal," I said simply. I hung the phone back on the cradle, cutting the connection with a final decisive click. I did not look back as I walked toward the heavy steel door. I could see him screaming silently behind the glass, pounding on the barrier. But he was already a ghost to me, a bad memory fading in the rearview mirror. I walked out into the bright French sunlight, took a deep breath of fresh air, and hailed a taxi to the airport. I was going home. Revenge is a forest fire that consumes everything in its path, burning the innocent alongside the guilty, leaving nothing but ash behind. Justice is different. Justice is a scalpel. It cuts out the rot, but it spares the healthy tissue. I stood in the hallway of the Fulton County Courthouse, watching the bailiffs lead Tyrell away. He was not walking free, but he was not walking into a cage for the rest of his life, either. I had kept my word. I sat in the judge's chambers with the district attorney, and I advocated for him. It was a complicated conversation. The prosecutor wanted to throw the book at both brothers, to make a headline, but I refused to let that happen. I explained that while Tyrell was a criminal, he was also a victim of his brother's manipulation. He had been weaponized, abused, and discarded. I argued that cooperation should have currency, that the truth had to be worth something, or no one would ever tell it again. The judge agreed, but he was firm. Tyrell had still broken the law. He had impersonated me. He had forged documents and he had stood in my living room with a gas can threatening to burn down my home. There had to be consequences. I did not argue with that. I did not want him to walk away thinking he was a hero. I wanted him to understand that actions have weight. The sentence was 18 months in a minimum security facility followed by 3 years of probation. The court mandated intensive drug rehabilitation and enrollment in a vocational training program. It was a sentence designed to build a man, not destroy him. I saw Tyrell just before they loaded him into the transport van. He looked different. The orange jumpsuit was the same, but the hunch in his shoulders was gone. He looked me in the eye for the first time without shame or defiance. Why, he asked, his voice raspy from years of smoke. Why did you help me? I terrorized you, Jasmine. I was going to burn your house down, because you told the truth, I said simply. And because, unlike your brother, you actually have a conscience somewhere in there. Do not waste this, Tyrell. You have spent your whole life being a cheap copy of a bad man. This is your chance to be an original. Be Tyrell Brooks, or be someone else entirely, but do not ever be his shadow again. He nodded slowly, a look of quiet resolve settling on his face. He didn't say thank you, and I didn't expect him to. He just stepped into the van, and the doors slammed shut. I later heard from his court-appointed lawyer that he had started his classes. He was learning HVAC repair, working with his hands, fixing things instead of breaking them. He was attending meetings, getting clean, waking up every day in a cell that was his own. Not a role he was playing for a paycheck. It felt right. I didn't feel the euphoric rush of victory I had felt in Paris watching Terence fall. That was triumph. This was peace. It was the quiet satisfaction of balancing the scales. I had not been soft. I had not been weak. I had been fair, and in a world filled with men like Terence Brooks, fairness was the most powerful weapon I possessed. The shadow was gone, and the man left behind finally had a chance to step into the light. The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of my home office, creating a pattern of light and shadow on the hardwood floor that felt incredibly peaceful. It was a Sunday, the kind of quiet, lazy day I had not enjoyed in years, because my life had been a chaotic storm of suspicion and gaslighting. I was reviewing a new contract for a freelance consulting gig, sipping hot tea, when the silence was shattered by the vibration of my phone against the mahogany desk. I looked at the screen. The photo was of Sarah, taken at a barbecue 2 years ago, when we were all pretending to be a happy family. She was smiling in the picture, holding a glass of wine, looking confident and secure. Now the name flashing on the screen just felt like a warning notification. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear what she had to say now that the dust had settled. Swiped right and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened, Jasmine. Oh, thank God. Jasmine. Sarah. His voice was a wreck. She was not just crying, she was hyperventilating, gasping for air between sobs. Jasmine, you have to help me. Please, Andre is crazy. He served me papers this morning. He is filing for divorce. Jasmine, he locked me out of the bank accounts. He canceled my credit cards. I have nothing. I cannot even buy groceries for the kids. I took a slow sip of my tea. The steam warmed my face while her panic poured into my ear. The debt collectors are calling every hour. She continued, her voice rising to a shriek. I put the trip on the Visa, Jasmine. I maxed it out thinking Terence would pay us back with the crypto returns. Now we owe $40,000 and Andre says it is my debt. He says he will not pay a dime of it. You have your money back, right? The bank refunded you. You are flush again. I just need a loan. Jasmine. Just until I get back on my feet. We are family. You cannot let your nieces starve. I set the teacup down on the coaster with a soft clink. The audacity was almost impressive. She was using the children as human shields, trying to manipulate the aunt who had always been the soft touch. But I was not soft anymore. I was forged in fire. Family, I said, my voice calm and steady, completely at odds with her hysteria. That is an interesting word, Sarah. I seem to remember. You had a different definition of family a few weeks ago. Jasmine, please, she wailed. Do not do this? No, Sarah. You listen, I said, leaning back in my chair. I remember standing in my kitchen trying to show you the discrepancies in the bank statements. I was terrified. I was losing my mind. And do you remember what you said to me? You rolled your eyes. You laughed. You told Andre that I was paranoid. You said I was jealous of your lifestyle. You said I was a bitter woman who could not stand to see her husband succeed. You even suggested I needed to go back on medication. There was a silence on the other, and a heavy, suffocating silence where I knew she was remembering every cruel word she had spoken. You were so sure of yourself, Sarah, I continued, my voice hardening. You thought you were the smart one, the sophisticated one. You looked down on me because I was an auditor, because I was careful. You called me boring. Well, that boring, paranoid woman just got her house back, and her dignity back. But I'm sorry, she whispered, a weak, pathetic sound. You are not sorry you hurt me. Sarah, I said coldly, you are sorry the gamble did not pay off. You are sorry you are broke. If Terrence had actually been rich, you would still be laughing at me right now, so here is my answer. No. Jasmine, please, she begged, desperation creeping back in. Use that superior intellect of yours, I said, cutting her off. You were so confident when you were spending money you did not have. Use that same energy to go get a job and earn it back. Do not call me again. I pulled the phone away from my ear, ignoring the sound of her calling my name. I pressed the red button, ending the call. Then I tapped the small icon next to her name and scrolled down to the bottom of the menu. Block caller. The phone went silent. The screen went dark. I took another sip of my tea and turned back to my contract. The sun was still shining, and for the first time in a long time, my life was entirely my own. The sunlight hit the cobblestones of the Rue Claire differently than it did a year ago. Back then, the city felt gray and cold, a backdrop for a war zone. Today, it looked like a painting washed in gold and smelling of roasted coffee and freedom. I sat at a small round table outside a bistro, the iron cool against my arm, watching the Parisians walk by with their baguettes and their effortlessly chic scarves. Across from me, Ebony was tearing into a croissant, flakes of pastry falling onto the table like snow. She looked relaxed, her pilot uniform traded for a linen blazer and sunglasses that reflected the blue sky. So it is done, she asked, taking a sip of her espresso. Her voice was casual, but I knew she was watching me closely, checking for cracks in the armor. It is done. I smiled, and for the first time in a decade the smile reached my eyes without effort. The closing documents were signed yesterday. The house in Buckhead is sold. New owners, a young couple expecting their first baby. They looked at the garage and saw a place to park a minivan, not a crime scene. They looked at the living room and saw a place for Christmas trees, not a place where I was held hostage by my own husband. I hope they are happy there. Ebony nodded approvingly, wiping crumbs from her fingers. Good. You held on to that place long enough to prove a point. You saved it from the bank. You won. But you did not need to live in a museum of bad memories. I took a breath, inhaling the scent of the city. Selling the house felt like setting down a heavy backpack I had been carrying for miles. I did not need the granite countertops or the oak tree in the backyard to define me anymore. I did not need the address to prove I was successful. I had something better now. I had a purpose. My phone buzzed on the table. It was not a threat from a creditor or a desperate plea from Sarah asking for a loan. It was a notification from a client, a wealthy tech CEO in Silicon Valley who wanted me to review her fiancé's financials before the wedding. She had heard about my firm. Business is booming, Ebony observed, glancing at the screen. It is, I admitted. We are booked out for 3 months. The tagline for my new firm was simple. Trust, but verify. I was not just doing corporate audits anymore. I had pivoted completely. I was now the premier forensic accountant for high net worth women entering marriage. I helped them draft ironclad prenups. I investigated their partners' hidden debts. I made sure that they knew exactly who they were marrying before they walked down the aisle. I was saving them from the heartbreak I had lived through. I looked at my sister. You know, I used to think my skepticism was a flaw. Terrence made me feel like my need to check the numbers was a sickness. He called it trust issues. He gaslit me into thinking I was crazy for wanting to see the receipts. But it was not a sickness, Ebony. It was a superpower. I am just teaching other women how to use it. Ebony raised her tiny espresso cup in a toast to Jasmine Brooks, the woman who turned a tragedy into an empire. I clinked my cup against hers, the porcelain chiming softly. No, I corrected her gently. Not Jasmine. Brooks. I dropped that name at the courthouse last month. To Jasmine Vance. I sat back in the wicker chair watching the world go by. The coffee was hot, the air was sweet, and my bank account was full. But the richest thing I owned was not the money. It was the knowledge that I would never be fooled again. I had audited my life and the balance was finally positive. A shadow fell across our little round table, breaking the pattern of sunlight on the white tablecloth. I looked up, shielding my eyes against the glare. Standing there was a man who looked like he had just stepped out of a GQ spread. He was tall, wearing a navy linen suit that was tailored to perfection, and he held himself with an easy grace that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin. He was not looking at Ebony. He was looking at me. Ebony smiled, a knowing glint in her eye behind her sunglasses. Jasmine, this is Mark, she said, gesturing casually. He is a senior architect at the firm that designed the new terminal at Charles de Gaulle. We went to flight school together back in the day. Mark, this is my sister Jasmine, the one I told you about. The legend. Mark smiled, and it was a genuine smile, warm and crinkling at the corners, dazzling white teeth against dark skin. It is a pleasure to meet you, Jasmine, he said, his voice a deep baritone that rumbled pleasantly. He extended a hand and I took it. His grip was firm but respectful, dry and warm. I hear you are the woman who makes terrifying men cry? I laughed softly, releasing his hand. Only the ones who deserve it, replied. My voice was steady. My heart rate did not spike. I did not feel that old, desperate need to be liked, to be chosen, to be validated. I just felt calm. I was just heading inside to grab a bottle of rose, Mark said, gesturing toward the bistro entrance. Would you ladies care to join me? Or perhaps I could buy a round for the table. It was a kind offer, a generous offer. The old Jasmine. The one who defined her worth by the man standing next to her would have jumped at the chance. She would have fluffed her hair, checked her lipstick, and spent the next hour trying to be charming, trying to secure the asset. But I was not that woman anymore. I looked at the glass of wine sitting in front of me. It was a vintage I had chosen. It was paid for with money I had earned, protecting women from men who looked just as charming as Mark. I looked back up at him and offered a smile that was polite but final. Thank you, Mark, I said, leaning back in my wicker chair, crossing my legs comfortably. But we are fine. We are. Just enjoying the sister time today. Maybe another time. He didn't push. He didn't get offended. He just nodded, recognizing the boundary I had set clearly and without apology. It was nice meeting you, Jasmine. Ebony, I will see you around. He walked away, disappearing into the bistro, leaving us in our bubble of sunlight. Ebony watched him go, then turned back to me, raising an eyebrow. He is single, she teased, and he owns a vineyard in Bordeaux, just saying. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the pale pink liquid, catching the light. I watched the way the sun danced through it, beautiful and self-contained. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the taste of crisp fruit and summer air. He is handsome, I admitted, setting the glass down. But I do not need a vineyard. Ebony, And I certainly do not need a man to validate my existence. I spent 10 years trying to be the perfect wife for a man who turned out to be a mirage. I am done auditioning for a role in someone else's movie. I looked at my sister, the woman who had flown across an ocean to save me, the woman who had handed me a black card when I had nothing, the woman who had stood beside me in the fire. She was the only partner I needed. I raised my glass again, holding it high against the Parisian skyline. To us, I said, my voice ringing with a joy that came from the very marrow of my bones. To freedom, and to the only things a woman really needs to be happy. A sister who can fly a plane and a damn good intuition. Ebony clinked her glass against mine, the sound chiming like a bell signaling the start of the rest of my life. Cheers to that, she said. We drank the wine and laughed, and the sound drifted up into the blue sky, free and untethered, finally belonging to no one but ourselves. The most profound lesson from Jasmine's journey is that intuition is not paranoia. It is a survival instinct that demands to be heard. We often silence our gut feelings to maintain the illusion of peace, but true security comes from the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Trust but verify is not just a professional motto, but a necessary life principle. Furthermore, financial independence and professional competence are your strongest forms of armor. Jasmine reclaimed her life not just because she was resilient, but because she possessed the skills to audit her own existence and the wisdom to know that true loyalty is proven in actions, not empty promises. Don't wait for a crisis to audit your life. Trust your gut, secure your independence, and never let anyone gaslight you out of your own reality. If Jasmine's resilience inspired you to take back your power, hit like and subscribe because your truth is always worth fighting for.